Evelyn's arms thrashed wildly against the cold water, but the more she fought, the deeper the lake pulled her under. Above the splashes of her struggle, she could still hear their voices, her own family, laughing as if her pain was entertainment. The betrayal cut deeper than the water filling her lungs. She screamed for help, but the only answer was the sound of footsteps walking away. Welcome back. As you enjoy the story, don't forget to like, comment, subscribe and also share with your friends. Now back to the story. Evelyn was the youngest child in the Williams family. She had two older sisters, Grace and Linda, and a brother, Michael. Their father, Richard Williams, was once a respected businessman in Lagos, but after his death, things changed quickly. Their mother, Angela, was left to raise them, and she leaned heavily on the older children to keep the family stable. Evelyn, being the youngest, was often dismissed as the weak one. Unlike her siblings, Evelyn was quiet and soft-hearted. She didn't fight back when they mocked her. Grace would laugh at the way she dressed, Linda would call her useless, and Michael often told her she would never amount to anything. Their words cut deep, but Evelyn endured in silence, hoping that one day they would see her differently. At home, she was treated more like a servant than a sister. She was always the one cleaning the kitchen late at night, running errands in the hot sun, and being sent away whenever important conversations were happening. If she complained, Angela would sigh and say, "Evelyn, you're the youngest. Just do as you're told. That's how families work." But Evelyn saw clearly that this wasn't family, it was survival. Things worsened after she got into university. She studied hard, even while struggling with money, and managed to get a small scholarship that helped her pay fees. Instead of being proud, her siblings became more bitter. Grace, who had dropped out, would sneer at her. Linda claimed Evelyn was pretending to be better than everyone. Michael said her education was a waste, that she should learn to face reality instead of chasing dreams. Still, Evelyn held on to hope. She believed that family ties were stronger than jealousy. She thought that deep down, they loved her. She was wrong. One Saturday, Grace announced that the family should go to the lake for a picnic. She insisted that it would be a good way to bond. Evelyn was surprised at how kind her sister sounded, but she agreed. It was rare for her siblings to include her in anything fun. She wanted to believe that maybe things were changing. The day of the picnic was sunny. They packed food and drove out of the city to a quiet lake surrounded by trees. At first, it felt almost like a dream, everyone laughing, sharing food, even joking with Evelyn. For the first time in a long while, she felt like she belonged. But as the evening fell and the sun began to set, things shifted. Grace and Linda began whispering to each other. Michael stood apart, looking uneasy. Evelyn noticed but didn't think too much of it. When they suggested that she go closer to the water to fetch something that had fallen in, she obeyed. That was when it happened. One push. That's all it took. Evelyn's body hit the cold water with a splash. She gasped, struggling to keep her head above the surface. She looked up and saw their faces, her own family, standing there. Grace's face was stone cold. Linda's lips curved in a cruel smile. Michael looked away, refusing to meet her eyes. "Help me!" Evelyn screamed, her arms thrashing. But no one moved. The water pulled her down. She kicked, desperate, but she was not a strong swimmer. As she went under, the last thing she saw was her family turning their backs and walking away. They left her there, to drown. For a moment, all Evelyn felt was betrayal so sharp it burned worse than the water filling her lungs. She thought of all the times she had forgiven them, all the times she had chosen love despite their cruelty. And this was how they repaid her. Darkness swallowed her. But that was not the end. When Evelyn sank into the cold water, she thought it was the end. But fate had other plans. A fisherman named David, who was casting his net nearby, noticed the ripples and rushed his canoe towards her. By the time he pulled her out, she was barely breathing. He carried her to his small hut by the lake and stayed up all night trying to save her. When Evelyn finally opened her eyes the next morning, her first words were a whisper, "They left me." David didn't ask too many questions at first. He gave her food, water, and a blanket. But as the days went by and Evelyn's strength returned, she told him the truth. David was shocked that her own family could do such a thing, but he saw the pain in her eyes and knew she wasn't lying. "Don't go back to them," he advised. "If they could do this once, they will do worse if they ever see you alive." Evelyn nodded. She knew he was right. A part of her still longed for her mother's embrace, but the image of her siblings turning away as she drowned was burned into her memory. That was not love. That was betrayal. So Evelyn made a decision. She would disappear. With David's help, she left the area and moved to another city, far from anyone who knew her name. She worked odd jobs, first as a cleaner, then in a restaurant, slowly saving money. She pushed herself through the pain, through the loneliness, through the nights she woke up crying. She refused to let their betrayal define her. Years passed. Evelyn grew stronger, wiser, and tougher. She finished her studies through a scholarship program, built connections, and eventually landed a good job in a company where her hard work was noticed. Piece by piece, she built a new life. But back in Lagos, her family thought she was gone forever. At first, they told neighbors Evelyn had gone missing. They cried fake tears at the police station and claimed she must have been kidnapped. Angela, their mother, wept genuinely. She truly believed Evelyn had vanished, never knowing the truth of what Grace, Linda, and Michael had done. But after some time, life continued. Grace married a wealthy businessman and moved into a large apartment. Linda got a managerial job in a fashion company. Michael started a car business with borrowed money. To outsiders, it looked like the Williams family was thriving. But inside, cracks were already forming. Grace's marriage was full of fights. Her husband accused her of being controlling and selfish. She had all the luxury she wanted, but she was never happy. Linda's job came with pressure. She stepped on so many people to climb the ladder that soon, colleagues began plotting against her. Michael's car business seemed successful, but he was drowning in debt. The more he tried to cover it up, the worse it became. And Angela, the mother, carried a grief that never left. Every birthday, every Christmas, she would mention Evelyn's name, asking, "What if she's still alive? What if she comes back?" Her words often silenced the room, making her children shift uncomfortably. But they never spoke the truth. Meanwhile, Evelyn was changing. The quiet, timid girl they once mocked was gone. In her place was a determined woman who had learned to stand tall, to speak with confidence, and to carve her own place in the world. She didn't plan on returning to them. She didn't want revenge. But destiny had other ideas. One day, almost 10 years after that night at the lake, Evelyn's company transferred her back to Lagos. As the taxi drove past familiar streets, her chest tightened. She told herself she had moved on, but deep inside, the wound was still there. That night, as she stood by her hotel window, looking out at the city lights, she whispered, "I never thought I'd come back." What she didn't know was that her return would change everything. For her family, for herself, and for the secrets they had buried. Evelyn didn't rush to see her family the moment she arrived in Lagos. She had learned patience over the years. Instead, she settled into her new apartment, went to work, and adjusted to life in the city again. She thought she could avoid them completely. But Lagos wasn't as big as she imagined. It happened one Saturday afternoon. Evelyn was at a supermarket, picking groceries, when she heard a voice she knew too well. She turned, and there stood Linda, her elder sister. Time had added weight to her body, but her sharp eyes hadn't changed. Linda froze, her mouth dropping open as if she had seen a ghost. Evelyn's heart raced, but she stood still, calm, her basket in hand. "Evelyn?" Linda whispered, her face draining of color. Evelyn didn't answer. She simply gave her a long look, steady, unreadable, then walked past her and left. That one encounter was enough to shake the entire Williams household. By evening, Grace was calling Linda nonstop, demanding details. Michael, when he heard, nearly dropped his drink. They all agreed on one thing: Evelyn should not be alive. Panic spread among them. Grace couldn't sleep that night. She kept hearing Evelyn's screams in her head. Linda drank herself to calm down, but it didn't work. Michael paced his apartment, whispering to himself, "This can't be real. She drowned. We left her there." Their mother, Angela, was the only one who reacted differently. When Linda nervously mentioned seeing Evelyn, Angela's eyes lit up with tears. "Don't play with me," she warned. "Don't you dare lie about my child. If she's alive, I want to see her with my own eyes." The siblings exchanged looks but said nothing. They couldn't confess the truth. They thought they had buried it forever, but Evelyn's presence was bringing everything back. Over the next weeks, strange things started happening. Grace's marriage hit rock bottom. Her husband filed for divorce, exposing her harsh behavior to everyone. Her friends whispered about her behind her back. The glamorous life she bragged about was slipping through her fingers. Linda was demoted at work after being caught in a lie she thought no one would discover. The shame followed her everywhere. The colleagues she once looked down on now mocked her openly. Michael's business collapsed. His investors pulled out, and debt collectors began circling his house. He started drinking heavily, avoiding calls, and sinking into despair. Angela, meanwhile, grew hopeful. She started praying louder than ever, telling her neighbors, "My Evelyn is alive. I can feel it." Then the day came. Evelyn was invited to a business event by her company. She arrived dressed simply but elegantly, her presence commanding attention. She didn't know Grace would be there too. When Grace saw her from across the hall, her wine glass slipped from her hand and shattered on the floor. People turned to look, but Evelyn didn't flinch. She walked past Grace as though she were a stranger. But her eyes, those eyes, burned with memories Grace wanted to forget. That night, Grace called her siblings in a panic. "She's back," she said, her voice trembling. "She's alive, and she's here in Lagos." On the other end of the line, Michael muttered, "If she tells Mom the truth, we're finished." But Evelyn didn't speak. She didn't go to her mother. She didn't accuse them. She let silence do the work. And the silence was worse than words. Because the more Evelyn lived her life quietly, the more their own lives started to crumble. It was as though her very existence was enough to expose them. And deep inside, each of them knew, this was only the beginning. Angela Williams had carried grief in her heart for nearly 10 years. Every time she set the table, she would pause, staring at the empty chair that once belonged to Evelyn. Every night before bed, she whispered a prayer, "God, bring her back to me. Even if just once, let me see her face again." So when she heard that Evelyn had been seen in Lagos more than once, she could no longer sit still. She went to the church near her house, knelt at the altar, and cried, "If my daughter is alive, let her come to me. Don't let me die without seeing her again." Her prayer was answered sooner than she imagined. It happened on a Sunday afternoon. Angela was coming out of a pharmacy when she saw a young woman step out of a car across the road. She froze. The woman's walk, her face, even the way she carried her bag, it was Evelyn. Evelyn. Angela screamed, her hands trembling. Evelyn stopped. For a moment, she looked unsure. The years apart had changed her. Her hair was shorter, her clothes sharper, her shoulders straighter. But a mother never forgets her child. "Mom," Evelyn whispered. Angela ran across the road, tears streaming down her face. She clung to Evelyn, sobbing uncontrollably. People passing by stopped to watch. Evelyn stood stiff at first, her mind battling between pain and longing. But slowly, she wrapped her arms around her mother. For the first time in years, she felt something she thought she had lost, love without condition. The news spread like wildfire. Angela called Grace, Linda, and Michael that evening and said, "Evelyn is back. She's alive. And this time, I will not let her go." Her words shook the siblings to their core. Grace tried to sound happy on the phone, but her voice cracked. "That's wonderful, Mom." Linda stayed quiet, her hands trembling as she held her drink. Michael's chest tightened. If she tells Mom the truth, everything will come crashing down. The three met secretly the next day at Grace's apartment. The tension in the room was thick. What if she exposes us? Linda asked. Grace snapped, then we're finished. Do you understand? Everything we've built will be destroyed. Michael buried his face in his palms. She hasn't said anything yet. Maybe she just wants to live her life. Grace shook her head. You don't know Evelyn. She may look calm, but she hasn't forgotten. She's waiting, watching. And they were right. Evelyn hadn't forgotten. When she sat with her mother at the dining table later that week, Angela held her hands and asked, Where have you been all these years? Who kept you away from me? Evelyn's heart pounded. She could have spoken the truth in that moment. She could have told her mother everything, that her siblings left her to drown, that they betrayed her in cold blood. But she saw the hope in Angela's eyes, the joy of having her daughter back. Breaking that joy felt like killing her mother twice. So Evelyn only said, Life kept me away. But I survived. Angela cried again, thanking God. The siblings, however, couldn't rest. Evelyn's silence was worse than accusation. She showed up at family gatherings when Angela insisted, greeting them politely but never warmly. She never mentioned the past, never asked questions, never accused, but her eyes told them she remembered everything. The pressure began to eat at them. Grace's divorce was finalized. She lost her house and moved into a smaller flat, her pride shattered. Linda was fired from her job after another scandal broke out, and her savings were almost gone. Michael was chased by debt collectors until one day they smashed his car in the middle of the street. Each downfall happened so quickly, so sharply, that they began to whisper among themselves, It's Evelyn. She's the reason this is happening. But Evelyn did nothing. She simply lived. She visited her mother, went to work, and built her life quietly. It was as if her very presence was enough to pull apart everything they had built on lies. One evening, Angela decided she wanted all her children at home for dinner, just like the old days. Evelyn didn't want to go, but she couldn't refuse her mother's pleading eyes. That night, for the first time in nearly a decade, all 4 siblings sat around the same table. The air was heavy. No one could meet Evelyn's eyes. The clinking of spoons against plates was the only sound. Then Angela smiled and said, I don't know what happened in the past. I don't know why Evelyn stayed away. But now that she's here, I want us to heal. I want us to be a family again. Grace's fork slipped from her hand. Linda's throat tightened. Michael's palms began to sweat. Evelyn kept her face calm, but inside her chest, her heart was a storm. Because for the first time, she realized she had a choice. She could tell the truth right there and destroy them. Or she could remain silent and let life keep punishing them without her saying a word. And as she looked around that table, at the family who betrayed her, Evelyn knew, this was the moment everything would change. The dinner table was too quiet. Angela tried to start conversations, but her children answered in short, nervous sentences. Evelyn barely spoke, her calmness heavy with unspoken words. At last, Angela sighed and said, You're all grown now. I'm getting older. My one wish is to see you united. Whatever happened in the past, let's put it behind us. Her words cut into Grace, Linda, and Michael like knives. They couldn't look at their mother. Evelyn sat still, her fingers tracing the rim of her glass. Then she lifted her eyes. Mom, you're right. Some things happened in the past that nearly destroyed me. Things I can never forget. The room went still. Grace's face drained of color. Linda dropped her napkin. Michael's chest rose and fell like he couldn't breathe. Angela frowned, confused. What do you mean, Evelyn? What happened? Evelyn looked at her siblings, one by one. They couldn't hold her gaze. She saw the guilt etched in their faces, the fear that the truth would finally spill out. For a long moment, she considered it. She imagined telling her mother how her children had left her to drown. She pictured the shock, the heartbreak. She knew it would crush Angela completely. But then Evelyn remembered David, the fisherman who saved her, and the words he once told her, don't let their evil define you. If you rise above it, you win. So she drew a deep breath and said, the past hurt me, but I chose not to let it destroy me. I won't talk about it tonight. What matters is, I survived. And I'm here. Angela's eyes filled with tears. She reached across the table and held Evelyn's hand tightly. Thank you, my child. But the silence that followed was unbearable for the others. Suddenly, Grace broke down. She pushed her plate away and covered her face. Mom, it's our fault. We left her at the lake that night. We thought she was gone forever. Angela froze. The room spun. What did you just say? Linda burst into tears, trembling. It was Grace's idea, but we all let it happen. We left her there. Michael's voice cracked. I wanted to stop them, Mom, but I didn't. I walked away. Angela clutched her chest as if her heart might burst. She turned to Evelyn, horrified. Is this true? Evelyn's eyes glistened. She gave a small nod. The room erupted into sobs. Grace knelt on the floor, begging. Evelyn, please. I was foolish, jealous, wicked. I ruined everything. Forgive me. Linda cried uncontrollably. We don't deserve mercy. Michael bowed his head. I've lived with shame all these years. I'm sorry, Evelyn. Evelyn looked at them, her heart heavy. She had dreamed of this moment many times, seeing them confess, seeing them broken. Yet standing there, she didn't feel victorious. She felt tired. She turned to her mother. Angela's tears wouldn't stop flowing. You carried this alone, Evelyn. And they, my own children, did this to you. How can we ever heal from this? Evelyn placed her hand gently on her mother's. By not letting hate win. If I hold on to anger, then they win twice, once at the lake and once in my heart. I can't let that happen. Her words silenced the room. Grace crawled closer, her voice shaking. So, you forgive us? Evelyn closed her eyes for a moment, then nodded slowly. I forgive you. Not because you deserve it, but because I deserve peace. The weight in the room shifted. The tears didn't stop, but something began to mend. For the first time, Grace, Linda, and Michael saw Evelyn not as the weak one, but as the strongest among them. Angela hugged Evelyn tightly, whispering, You're the light in this family. Don't ever let them take that from you again. In the months that followed, things changed. Grace started over with humility, working hard instead of relying on pride. Linda took responsibility for her mistakes and slowly rebuilt her career. Michael sought help for his debts and began earning an honest living. They weren't perfect, but the guilt had forced them to face themselves. As for Evelyn, she finally found peace. The scars of betrayal would never fully fade, but she refused to let them control her. She continued building her life, this time surrounded by people who truly valued her. And through it all, Angela found joy again, not because her children were flawless, but because they had been forced to confront the truth. Thanks for watching. Please like, share, subscribe and turn on your notification for more. See you soon.